Great taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.
Hi, and welcome to Great Taste. We're live at KRUU, actually satellite location for Great Taste, which is Hy-Vee. And we're here with Dennis Lott, catering manager for Hy-Vee. I'm Steve Boss, and grating that Parmesan cheese right now is the lovely Kathy Dubois.
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
Happy Halloween.
Hey, yes, happy Halloween. Oh my gosh. Kath, we forgot something.
Yeah, but I
Isn't it?
can't see with that something.
Well, we're gonna have to do it before the evening's over because, you know, it's really important. We have to, you know, play our parts at some point. Anyway, I'm Steve Boss, and you are listening to Great Taste on solar-powered Crew FM. We're coming to you live from Hy-Vee, and we are not presenting a complete Halloween show. We're presenting a partial Halloween show because Dennis is going to make caramel apples a little bit later on, organic caramel apples, and we're very excited about that. And meanwhile, we're going to do something that we discussed last week. We talked about making risotto and farrotto, two dishes that are absolutely fantastic for fall and winter that will give you just a great comfort when you eat them, and also they're fun to cook. So we're going to kind of teach everybody a little bit about how to make those wonderful dishes. We're going to make two different styles. One is going to be the rice is going to be just with what, Kath?
I'm going to make an herb risotto, and it's going to have shallots and leeks and garlic, carrot and celery as my base. What's it called?
Soffrito.
Soffrito, yes. And then rice and cheese and butter, the usual Parmesan. Usual risotto ingredients. And prior to coming, Steve and I both made stocks. So we made vegetable stocks. And we'll show you how we use that as it goes on.
And we actually could use somebody who is skilled at taking notes. If there's anybody here who's skilled at taking notes, maybe we can get a piece of paper, because I've been asked, could we please have the recipe when the evening's over, which we're so lax at doing. And so I said, well, if we can get somebody who can take notes, then as Kathy and I go over everything, we'll post it on the website. So if there's anyone
we'll appoint a secretary.
Right. So if there's anyone who's kind enough to do that, that's great. And if not, then we're not going to worry about it, are we? Everybody's going to have, Damarie will do it. That's awesome. So all we need is a piece of paper, and I don't know if Eric might be able to find us a piece of paper, or Dennis could find us a piece of paper, but if you could do that, that would be fantastic. So we'll be able to post that on the website. So very, very excited. Tom Allen is with us, our resident musician. We're so happy to have you. It's your birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Tom. Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So, are you going to play Happy Birthday to yourself? We want to sing to you.
We might drag James over here to play the guitar.
At some point, we can do that. Yeah, at some point, we can definitely do that. Jason Strong is here from FMC. James Moore has taken the place of Caleb Flynn as producer and director and everything else for Crew FM. And on a more serious note, we do have other things to do here other than cook. We actually have Ann Dietrich is in the house, and Ann is going to join us to talk about her work organizing the food movement into a cohesive political force. Something that the food movement has actually not had, even though there have been lots of things going on in the food movement for many, many years, but it really has never had a cohesive political force. On the world front, you have the Slow Food Organization, which started in Italy over 20 years ago, that has worked quite a bit on that political level. But in the United States, it's been something that's been missing. So Ann is here because she's the founding director of the Truth in Labeling Coalition, a nonprofit political advocacy organization formed in March 2008. And it's designed to advance the work, making everybody knowledgeable about labeling genetically modified foods. So, this is very important because on next Tuesday in California, Proposition 37 is on the ballot to allow people to make a decision, as we do in a democratic society, whether or not they want their foods labeled, whether or not they really want to know what they're eating, which I find so strange. Why in the world would you have to think about voting yes or no, whether you want to know what you're eating? But, hey, That's the way it is. So Ann is going to join us in a little bit, and we're going to discuss the issue, but we're going to discuss it a little bit differently. We're going to talk really about the politics of the whole thing. We're going to talk about her work in Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist for the food movement. Now, let's get to serious food. Because risotto is a fantastic dish that you can make. Everybody can make this at home. It's very simple. There's nothing difficult about it, but you have to follow certain steps. One of the things that you might want to check out is that I put several blog references in the blog post that's on the station's website, www.kruufm.com. A couple of them were sent by friendly people who wanted everyone to know a little bit more about making risotto. And the thing is that one of them that I posted was from Serious Eats, which is one of my favorite websites. And I dislike the entire blog post, but I thought that it was something that you should read. Because basically what this guy did was he just decided to analyze cooking risotto from a very, I don't know, we'll call it logical, modern standpoint, tossing out all the wonderful traditional aspects of this dish and just saying, oh, you don't need to sit there and stir it. Oh, you don't need to really toast it. You don't really need to have your broth hot. You know, all those things are ridiculous. Here's my risotto turned out fine. All of the ones that I cooked turned out great without any of these things. So basically what he did was he took the magic out of cooking this dish. This dish is a wonderful dish that allows you to really just enjoy cooking it on the stove and spending some time with it and then serving it to your family and friends so that they can really appreciate the work that you've done. So read that just because I think it's important to read what I believe a lot of people do these days, which is they take the heart and soul out of the kitchen for convenience sake. It's going to take just as long to cook it either way. It's just a question of whether you're doing other steps in between. You're not going to cut down the amount of time.
I think the one point, though, is just the stock. Some people feel like they can just make a really quick stock with bouillon or maybe bouillon and tomatoes and water. And you know, and the stock is really important in risotto. So it's not to say that that wouldn't turn out, but it might just be a little bit better. It definitely will be better if you put some good ingredients and time into making a stock.
Yes, because most recipes call for low sodium chicken broth, canned. Well, as one person said, if you're going to need a chicken broth, make it yourself. I mean, come on. Again, it's not any big deal. Think about it ahead of time. Get yourself a chicken, get some celery and some carrots and some onion, and make yourself a chicken broth. You don't need somebody else to make it for you. It's very, very easy and simple to do. So, Kathy and I, as we told you, we both made vegetable stock, and I actually wished, maybe there'll be some left over, you can taste it after the show. Those of you who are listening, that might be a little bit difficult because we haven't figured that part out yet, have we? We say this is radio you can actually taste, but we're kind of just joking a little bit, right? Yeah, I mean, we'd like to be able to do it. Yeah, right, you never know. It might happen eventually. So, because it's important to understand what these broths are like, because they're really, really full flavored. Kathy can tell you what's in hers. Mine has kale stalks, parsley with the stems, fresh peppercorn, fresh. It has a number of peppercorns in it. It has some garlic, some actually fresh garlic. It has carrot, celery. I would have liked to have found celery that had a lot of good leaves, but I couldn't find any of that, so it's really great because the leaves have more flavor. And it also has white wine and salt and anything else that I put in there. I think that was about it. I would have put a bay leaf in, but I actually forgot to put the bay leaf in. So it turned out fantastic. Maybe I shouldn't say that myself, but it turned out really great. Kath, what was in yours?
Similar. Mine has red onion and garlic, carrots, celery, quite a few bay leaves, parsley stems, salt, and probably some other things, but I can't remember.
Mushrooms.
Oh, mushrooms. I put mushrooms in to make it a little bit browner. I don't usually put mushrooms in it, but I just tried it.
Thinking about that, actually that would go better. That stock, the color of that stock goes better with what I'm making because I'm using farro and you're using rice, which is
I'm using this,
white.
And you're using...
Right. I'm using brown, which goes better with brown stock. But that's okay. That's the way it is.
Do you want to switch?
No. So we're using two different grains. we're using rice, and it's very specific. There are 3 kinds of rice that are generally used for making risotti. Risotto is the singular in Italian, risotti is the plural. And so when you go and you look for rice for risotto, you're actually looking for rice. You're not looking for risotto, because risotto is the dish, the finished product. Cooked rice is essentially what it means. So 3 kinds of rice are arborio, which is the most ubiquitous, and you can actually find arborio here at Hy-Vee, and you can also find it in other shops in Fairfield. And then there's carnaroli and vialone nano. They're all medium grain rices, and the one thing about the rices is that they all have one thing in common, and that is that they have this outside layer of starch that will lend itself, as it breaks down, to a creamier dish at the end. Now, the main difference between arborio and the other 2 is that arborio is, sorry? Go ahead. Oh, because, you know, Dennis, you can use this microphone right here if you want to say something. I'm going to give it to you. Well, yeah, I heard your voice, so I just didn't know what it was. Yeah, go ahead.
The first step, I'm just going to do this while he's talking.
Can we move that? No, I guess not. Okay. No, don't worry about it.
The first step is to chop up some celery, leeks, carrots. I've used a little shallots and garlic. Fine. I did them quite fine. And I'm going to put it in, I'm using butter. Steve is using olive oil. So I'm going to put that in and let it saute for a while. Okay.
And I'm going to put some butter in mine too, because I always use a combination of butter and olive oil. It gets you a much fuller flavor, really, really wonderful. So anyway, going back to the rice, the 3 different kinds of rice are arborio, vialone nano, and carnaroli, and the major difference, it's a very important difference, is that the internal starch for carnaroli and vialone nano stays more integral throughout the entire cooking process. So 1, it forgives you more if you let it cook too long, because you want to serve risotti al dente, just like pasta. It should be to the tooth. It should have bite to it. It shouldn't be mushy. It shouldn't just, it should have texture to it. So it's very important when you cook your rice that if you want to have a little bit of leeway, you want to use carnaroli or vialone nano. Because if you use arborio, you better get it out at the exact moment that it's ready. And you're never going to have seconds of arborio that aren't mushy. They're always going to be mushy. So that's why carnaroli and vialone nano are my 2 favorites to use. And what we're going to be using is a carnaroli rice that comes from the Veneto region of Italy. It comes from an area that is near Verona. It was milled in a mill that was built in the 1500s, and that mill still uses it. What's really interesting about this mill is that if you want it milled in a modern way, you can get it milled that way. But if you want it milled in the old way, where they use these wooden pounders, essentially, you have to pay more. So that's interesting. Anyway, so this rice is they call it semi-integrale, which means it's semi-milled. It's not white, it's not brown, it's in between. So it's going to be a little bit more nutritious for you than white rice is going to be. And also, interestingly enough, when you cook this type of rice and make a risotto, you're not going to get as much creaminess as you would with a white rice. That's just, you got to just give it up if you want to use this type of rice that has a little bit more nutritional value to it. The other grain that we're going to use is farro. And I'm going to pass this around so you can see what this is, because I think a lot of people aren't familiar with it. The masterful buyers here at Hy-Vee actually have farro here, organic farro, and I am amazed and very impressed. Just like you had the salt a couple of weeks ago that we wanted to use, which is, so it's fantastic. There's a wonderful selection. Oh, a spider bit the dust. Look at that. So anyway, you can pass these around, let people see, these different grains, so you can see exactly what it's like. This is farro. You want to hold out your hand, and you can pass it to your mom and dad. That's good. So anyway, farro is really a progenitor of wheat. Don't let anyone tell you, because wow, this spider is wild. It wants to do all kinds of stuff. Don't let anyone tell you, yes, don't let anyone tell you that farro is the same as wheat. Farro is not the same as spelt. A lot of people think farro is exactly the same as spelt. It is not the same as spelt, not the same as wheat. It is a progenitor of wheat. It has been around for maybe 18,000 years. It's a very wonderful grain, full of nutrition, and it's not subject to the same diminution that wheat varieties have been subject to over the last number of years, because it's still grown in the same way. This particular farro comes from Abruzzo, the Abruzzo region of Italy, and it's an organic farro, and it's the same as the rice. It's semi-integrale. It's been milled a slight bit, so part of its outer husk has been taken off, so it cooks a little bit quicker, but it's not been milled all the way. So those are some of the key things in terms of looking for different grains to use in risotto, farrotto. Risotto comes from northern Italy. The classic risotto is risotto milanese. So risotto in the style of Milan, that's where it was supposedly invented. And
What is that? What is the risotto?
Risotto milanese is a risotto with saffron. So it's absolutely gorgeous looking and it has this unique taste that saffron. It's kind of a taste that either you like it or you don't like it, you know. I love it, but it's not something I would use or want to eat all the time. And the other thing that I want to mention, because we may not have time to deal with this tonight, is that one of the great things about risotto is that it's fantastic for leftovers. So if you have anything left over, all you have to do is take your rice or your farro and form it into patties and just put them in a shallow pan and cook them on both sides in some butter or some olive oil and sprinkle them with a little Parmesan cheese, a little fresh basil, however you want to make it. The other thing is that you can incorporate any ingredients into it. Tonight we're making, I'm making the farro with butternut squash and fresh sage. If I ever get around to peeling the butternut squash, I wonder if there's anybody wants to. Yeah, somebody want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh. Well, if he gets tired, then you can come out and do it. So you can wash your hands right back there. Thanks so much. Anyway, you can put just about anything in it. Doesn't matter what it is. If you're in one particular area, since the dishes do come from Italy, if you're in one particular area like Liguria or in the Veneto near Venice, it's going to be seafood. It's always going to be seafood in your risotti. One day, I wasn't even eating seafood at this particular time in my life, and I went to the bathroom and I was with a guest, and when I came back, that's what I got, and it was wonderful. I was in Liguria, and all this risotto appeared with all these different beautiful fruits of the sea, essentially, frutti di mare, and it was absolutely wonderful. So here are the knives, and here you go. Pardon us, those of you who are listening on the radio, while you can move that around. And I don't know if you know too much. Actually, peeling a butternut squash can be a pain, and my wife showed me this technique, which I think is wonderful, which is instead of trying to use a peeler and peeling the whole thing, cutting it into chunks, and then just using a paring knife and going around in essentially a half moon, and you easily just cut off the peels that way. So, okay. But you can do any way you like. Doesn't matter. All right. So we talked about the types of rice. We talked about farro and farrotto. You really won't find too much unless you're in Tuscany or maybe in Umbria. Those two areas, you're not going to find it in the far north because farro is not grown in the far north. The rice is grown in the north of Italy. Farro is grown in the central area of Italy, in Umbria, in Tuscany, and also in the mountains like this one in Abruzzo. And there's many different types of farro that are grown just like rice, and they all have different flavors. So you got to find what you like. Find what tastes the best to you, and go from there. Everything okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, and when you finish, just kind of cut up into small chunks like this. Okay. All right. And then we're going to need another pan to cook. Yeah, we're going to cook that in here. So if you want to do that.
Okay. You can take my broth off.
Okay, we can do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to cook the vegetables that are going to go into my farrotto. So that butternut squash is going to be cooked in a little bit of. What would be great if you could put a little shallot in there too. Kathy probably has some extra shallot, and cook some shallot in with that butternut squash. Sure. Would be really nice. Thank you for your help. He gets an extra portion at the end of the show. So any questions so far? Because if anybody in the audience has questions, we're ready to go and talk with them. Who makes risotto at home? Yeah. What's your favorite?
I love butternut squash risotto. I also love saffron and asparagus.
So you came on a good night.
But I also love farrotto. I love farro.
Okay. Anybody had farro here other than Laurie? Anybody else? So, oh, this is great. Nobody's had it. This is going to be a big treat then.
I wonder if they will have it tonight.
Well, we'll see. No, I think they will. I think that they'll have some. So, yes.
My grandmother was from northern Italy, and she would always make her risotto with peas. She'd throw some peas in and wait till they were really soft. Wonderful. And then Parmesan cheese.
The very first risotto I ever had was at a restaurant in New York called Da Umberto, and it was in the spring, just before very, very early spring, and it was a pea risotto with fresh peas. It was so bright green. It was just gorgeous, and I fell in love with the dish at that point. And I mentioned several risotti that I had had that just have stuck in my mind. If you want to read that, you can read the blog post. But one that I didn't mention because I wanted some clarification on it was one that was cooked by Ms. Dubois here on the show once several years ago, and it was absolutely one of the very best I've ever had. It was a mushroom risotto that was so rich that I probably had to go to the doctor afterwards to have my cholesterol checked. So, but it was absolutely fantastic.
I just wanted to show you where this is at right now. We've sautéed the vegetables that I diced, and at this point I'm going to start with wine. I'm going to put some wine in here. The vegetables will cook more because we're going to cook this risotto for about 20 minutes. So
while you're doing that, I think what we're going to do with ours is we're going to let ours get a little bit later start so that we're going to have it in stages. And maybe what we can do, if there's time, if we can do it in an easy way, is let people actually taste Kathy's, because when it's finished, if we get some plates out and everything and let people taste it, we'll pass it around, because the truth is that you don't want to let your risotto sit around, because what's going to happen is that all that moisture that you have when you get ready to serve it is just going to soak in to the rice, and you're just going to have a big globby mess. So you want to serve it right away, and we're going to discuss what that's like. It's called, you want to serve it when it's al onda is the right expression, and that means wavy. And we'll show you what that means. It's such a fun dish to make. It's just absolutely great. Why am I using two mics? I don't need to use two mics. That's so bizarre. Okay, yes.
So what kind of white wine are you using?
We're using an Italian Chardonnay. You want to use a dry white wine, something that's dry, and preferably, I just like to use a wine that comes from the area that, what you're cooking. If you're cooking something from France, use a wine from France. If you're cooking something from Italy, use a wine from Italy. That's just the thing. So while we're getting everything going, and my sous chef is doing a great job peeling everything here, we're going. Oh, one more question.
Talk about why you use the wine, because I've seen recipes recently where it's not used.
Well, the wine gives a real crisp, acidic taste. It adds some acidity. It adds a layer of flavor. So anytime you can add a layer of flavor, you're probably just one step ahead. So it's really, really good to use wine. There's actually several basic steps in cooking risotto or farrotto. It's the same. And those are, very simply, soffrito, which is where we're going. Kathy told you, we're doing basically a mise en place of onion or shallot with some garlic, some carrot, and some celery, all chopped very fine. And so we're creating a flavor layer at the base of our dish. And then what we're going to do is what's called the tostatura. We're going to toast the rice in this flavor layer. We're going to toast it for 2 or 3 minutes until it gets a little bit of a sheen on it and just looks really nice. And that's going to, be another layer, again, of flavor. Then we're going to add the wine, or the broth, and the broth. First we're going to add the wine and let it cook out, and then we're going to start adding broth, just a little bit of broth at a time, and let it cook out until when you move the rice or the farro, you won't see any liquid at the bottom of your pot, and then you'll know it's time to add some more broth. So that's the key. Add a little bit of broth at a time, and then you cook it out, and then you add a little bit more and you cook it out. By the way, if you've never cooked pasta in this manner, you can do this. They do this in Puglia, which is in the southwest of Italy, and it's actually fun. I like it that way. My wife does not like it cooked that way, but it's another way you can do it, where you just put the pasta in the pot and all your stuff, and you start to add water and cook it out and add water and cook it out. I like it, but anyway. And then the next step, the final step is called mantecatura, which is basically the stirring in. So you're going to stir in at the end. You've off heat, taken it off the heat, and you stir in butter and Parmigiano. And the whole key, again, to cooking this dish, as in any dish, is using really good fresh ingredients. That's the whole key to it. So while the cooking is going on, I'd like to introduce our guest, Ann Dietrich. And Ann, I'm going to hand you this microphone. And if you want to, you can come up here and talk with us, or you can sit there and turn around so everybody can see you. That's just fine. Stand up would be good. Jason says to stand up, so that's great. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the work to inform people about what's in their food.
Well, sorry to do this, everyone. This is a very scary subject in such a wonderful kitchen with such wonderful food and people, but it's Halloween, so I have an excuse.
Go ahead.
I got involved in this 17 years ago when Mothers for Natural Law was petitioning the Organic Standards Board to keep genetically engineered ingredients out of the organic standards. And that was something I did as a volunteer, and then I went on from there to help Steve Drucker when he filed a lawsuit against the FDA regarding its policy on labeling genetically engineered food. And then I started an organic kitchen. I did catering and made bread, and I cooked for John and Suzel Fagan. And I continued this until I was hired by Genetic ID as an account initiator. And my job was to look for new testing business for companies that wanted to know whether or not there was genetically engineered ingredients in the food. And most of the clients were people that were shipping overseas where genetically engineered products had to be labeled. And I found out then that the Coke that people drink in your EU is not the same Coke as we drink here. That the big companies like Kellogg's and Kraft and so forth were formulating their products for overseas markets completely different than the food that we were eating here. And I was working with this really boring mailing list trying to penetrate these big, huge multinational corporations, and I just started doing a lot of research on my own, and I started talking to people like Bob Gerner at the Natural Grocery Company and Asa at the Big Carrot in Toronto. And these were people who had already were concerned about genetically engineered ingredients in food and had started something called the Non-GMO Project, which was a group of retailers that were concerned about what was in their food. And this is what led to the formation of what we know, the non-GMO verification protocol, which now we see these little labels on our bags of Benitos and so forth that say this product doesn't contain genetically engineered ingredients. It's been verified by a third party and it's been tested, so we know this.
Briefly, why do we care whether it does or it doesn't?
Why do we care? Because food is love. And really how our food is grown, where it comes from, how it's made is really important. We are what we eat. And genetically engineered food is our ingredients, or GMOs, are experimental life forms. They're new experimental life forms that have never existed on Earth, can never happen naturally in nature, and are made in a laboratory. In order to make genetically engineered ingredients, you have to forcibly insert the DNA from one species into the genes of a completely different species, and it violates the natural barriers between species in a way that could never happen in nature.
That to me is absolutely scary. But whether it's scary or not, and whether people like it or not, I'm going to go back to a more basic principle. A more basic principle is, do we or do we not have the right to know what's in the food that we're eating? Because I think that's really at the source of what's going on, whether it's genetically modified or not. Do we or do we not have the right as consumers to know what's in the food we're eating?
Good question, Steve. My feeling is that no one has the right to tamper with your food without your knowledge.
That's why people used to have tasters, right? By the way, if you're worried tonight, we can have somebody taste this for you. Anyway, So this is a very hot topic. Obviously, you've got people on many different sides here. You've got people who say that there's nothing wrong with genetically modified foods, and who needs to know? Why do people actually need to know? And there's millions and millions of dollars going into fighting this initiative in California, being spent, of course, by huge companies who don't want you to know what's in your food. Which is it's extraordinary to me. But anyway, we've talked about this before. We don't really need to rehash the topic this evening, because what I'm more interested in and what I want to talk with you about is your work in Washington, because I think it's interesting to know for all of us as consumers, who have you talked to, especially in our own local representatives in Iowa, and what type of reception do you find from elected officials to this entire topic?
Well, if you walk in with signatures from people in your when people in their district saying that we want genetically engineered foods labeled, they treat you pretty much like royalty, no matter where you come from, because members of Congress love signatures. They love hearing from their constituents. And honest to God, this was basically Mrs. Smith Goes to Washington. I was pretty clueless about this. I never thought it was going to be me knocking on the doors of these members' offices. But that's how it worked out, and it is a blast, because there is a one-to-one correspondence between what happens here in Fairfield with the Invincible America Assembly, with the Transformation and Collective Consciousness, and what happens in D.C. Because mostly decisions in Washington are made in a vacuum. And they have not, and most of the members that I talked to were clueless. So it was really surprisingly so. Like even Orrin Hatch from Utah, who's very big on pharmaceuticals, he was not aware of this.
He was not aware of the issue of genetically modified foods?
Not even aware of the issue, which was mind-boggling. And no one, I mean, there is some work done, in the past, a little bit of lobbying, and mostly got burnt out. But no one really has been lobbying Congress. We instigated a congressional letter to the FDA in response to a citizen petition filed with the Center for Food Safety. 1.2 million Americans told the FDA we want this labeled. 55 members of Congress signed on and said, yes, we support this. We basically happened overnight, and I followed up with all 55 member offices, and they had heard from a handful of constituents. This is not something that people hear about. The Organic Trade Association told me when I started this that we're on the Hill every day, and what we hear from members is that they don't know about this. They don't hear from their constituents. So what I would like to do tonight is to encourage you all to pick up the phone and call Senator Harkin, call Senator Grassley, call Congressman Loebsack, and tell them exactly how you feel about unlabeled genetically engineered food. And I know we all have kind of some preconceived notions about what they're like, but it does make a difference.
And you're listening to Ann Dietrich, who is talking to us about lobbying and the food movement's presence in Washington. This is Great Taste on KRUU 100.1 FM, the solar-powered voice of Fairfield, Iowa. We're coming to you live from Hy-Vee, where Kathy Dubois is busy making risotto and showing everybody what's happening.
Steve's farrotto.
Thank goodness somebody else is taking over. And we have a wonderful sous chef helping us chop things, and Dennis Slopp, the catering manager here, is busy working on organic caramel apples. So all kinds of stuff happening as always. And Anne, thank you very much for informing us, because I think it's really important. We live in a democracy, and most people feel like they don't really have any power. But I think that what you're saying is very interesting, because what you're saying is that representatives do listen, but you have to make yourself heard.
I spent an hour and a half with Senator Grassley when he came to Lockridge in August. And it was very interesting. There was kind of it was a very small kind of gathering like this, and there's some back and forth. But at the end, he had written down on his yellow manila notepad, GMOs dangerous. I mean, these people...
Didn't have a question mark?
No, he doesn't have he can't really follow the standard riff anymore. And I can tell you, Senator Harkin's office, he's our senator. He's accountable to us. He represents us. So he will always, pay attention to what you have to say. Anyway, he is the chair of the Senate Help Committee, which is a very influential Senate committee in Congress that oversees the health, education, labor, and pension. It oversees the FDA. They have launched a formal inquiry to the FDA regarding its policy on labeling genetically engineered food. And if they don't hear from you, I mean, come on. It's really fun to pick up the phone and talk to these people. And if you're listening from...
Hi, Senator Harkin. Hi, Senator Grassley. I want to talk to you about genetically modified food. Generally, aren't you going to get their recorder?
You'll get their people. If you're really shy, you can call 24/7 and leave a message. But these people work for you. They work for us. And so it's our job to communicate with them. And if you don't know who your representative is, if you're not in Iowa's 2nd District, you can go to house.gov, find out who your congressperson is by just putting in your zip code, or go to senate.gov, put in your zip code, and you'll know who your senators are. So this is really our patriotic duty, because really we have the power. You have the power to do this, and we're going to, people are catching on.
It's very interesting. I still go back to the point I made at the beginning, which I don't understand. And maybe when we look at the audience here, maybe people do have. I actually have a lapel mic, so I don't have to worry about holding that. But what is the big deal about this whole thing? That's what I just don't get. I have never been able to get it through my head. Shouldn't we know? I don't want to belabor the issue, but shouldn't we know what we're eating? I mean, it's like, hello. We're eating this. Shouldn't we know what's going in our bodies? And to think that there's people who are trying to keep us from knowing what's going on in our bodies is very strange to me. But I understand that. I understand that we live in a society where people do try to make money, but maybe they could make it in a way that was healthy. I mean, we have lots of problems with diabetes. We have problems with high blood pressure. We have problems with all kinds of things that are obviously and very directly food related. So therefore, it would be nice to see us as consumers take action to try to help all of us, get healthier simply by calling our representatives and letting them know that you'd like, a very innocuous thing. You'd just like to know what you're eating. It's not like you're for or against anything, really. You're just for trying to find out what you're eating. That's all it is. Maybe you even like even if you like the idea of genetically modified foods, I would still think you'd want to know what you were eating. Still think you'd like to know that, that grain that I just had has fish bacteria in it, for example. Whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, this is a kind of scary scenario. But like Wall Street basically raped the rest of the world to make its bucks. So we just turned them loose. They did whatever they wanted to do. And this is same thing which has happened with the food companies. And so, if we care about what we eat, obviously we want to know, and so we can make a difference. And one thing you can do right now is call California and encourage people to vote yes on Prop 37. And I can give you the number and the email address. It's really fun. You use an automated database on your computer. And Alexis, Alexis, at California, right2know.org. And you email her and she'll give you an RSVP and you can sign up and make phone calls. Or you can call Alexis at 323-218-9844. That's 323-218-9844.
All right, get involved in your government. I think that's another message that the other thing that I have to do is I have to get involved in the farrotto, because things are happening back here that are scary too. And we have to be really careful. So thank you, Anne, very much for joining us. And if people have questions, you'll be here, so you can talk to them. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. And your work.
Dennis has made a couple of really cool apples.
I understand that, but first we have to... Okay, so here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. So what you want to do when you're cooking your vegetables right now, which should have been cooked in this pot right here, not in the sofrito. So... what we wanted to do was we wanted to cook the butternut squash in a separate pot with a little shallot, and then we would start our sofrito here, just like you did. But the good news is this. The good news is this, right? We're going to take most of that out because you've got to leave room for your grain to cook. If you have all kinds of stuff piled into your pot where you're trying to cook your grain, you're never going to cook it correctly. So we're going to take 3/4 of everything out of here, and we're going to put it in another pan and cook it so that squash is right when we add it back in with about 2 minutes left.
So what do you want in the bottom of your
We just
pan?
put some olive oil and a little bit of butter. It's fine. Did we chop up the fresh sage, by the way?
Yes, chef.
There it is, right there. We need to chop up that fresh sage because that's got to go into the fresh sage, and butternut squash is perfect. What a combination. It's great. Now, is somebody also watching out for the salt? Because here's another thing that's really critical about cooking risotto and farrotto. I've heard this over and over in my house for many, many years because I didn't do it right. So I'm going to pass it along to you, and that is.
I was the one that told you that.
Did you really? I think it was both my wives, right? Yeah, I think yeah. So I think we'll have to tell that story sometime. That would be pretty funny.
Actually, someone just asked me what I was adding, and I did add salt in because, as you're going to explain,
please.
It's good to add it in stages. So you put some in your stock, and then you taste and see whether it needs more, and it did need more, so we're putting it in now. We don't want to put it in at the end necessarily. I mean, if it needs a little finishing with salt, that's okay, but we want it to get immersed into the grains.
Exactly.
That's to permeate the grains
right.
of the rice.
And you can't go, I mean, it doesn't work if you wait till the end to add your salt because it will just be on the surface. It won't be cooked into the actual grain itself. So
what I'm doing now is I am adding, as you probably have seen, I'm adding the broth ladleful by ladleful. I usually use maybe 2 ladlefuls at a time and cook it so that the liquid is pretty much evaporated, and then add more. And continue to, thought you were going to throw that in mine. And continue to stir so that we're making it creamy at the same time.
And what I just did is I've added the farro into this, and I'm going to start what we call the tostatura, where we're going to toast the grains of farro in here for 2 to 3 minutes. And while we do that, I want to actually say that we need to get the fire, make sure the fire's going on this so that it's ready to go. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Dennis, while we work on our risotti and our risotto and our farrotto, tell us a little bit about caramel apples.
Okay, well, I made, Steve asked me to make an organic carameled apple, and I think he was trying to challenge me a little bit, but
met the challenge.
I think we did. I actually went to our resource that we have, it's mailed to everybody in Fairfield, and we use it a lot here at the store, called the Hy-Vee Seasons magazine. It comes out once every season, hence the name. And it's mailed directly to everybody in Fairfield. And there's usually a lot of great products, a lot of really good recipes. I can tell you after doing a month of cooking classes and different things in this room that have all been centered around this magazine, the recipes are all very successful and very tasty. And one of them that's in here is a homemade caramel recipe. And they use all conventional ingredients, sugar, corn syrup, and all of that. And all I did was I just went out to our health market and purchased everything, the same things, just organic. And we're using organic apples. Everything in the caramel is organic, so organic butter, organic corn syrup, organic sweetened condensed milk, light brown sugar, and a little bit of sea salt and vanilla in there. And it's really a simple recipe. And as you can see, it's really creamy. I can't do this very well, but it's really creamy and liquidy, and it has a really good buttery taste because butter's the base of it. So, and we did 2 sticks of butter, 2 1/4 cups brown sugar, a can of sweetened condensed milk, a cup of corn syrup, and then just a little bit of salt to taste and a little bit of vanilla to taste. They say a teaspoon of vanilla, but I don't know anybody who just puts a teaspoon of vanilla in anything. So vanilla goes a long way in my household. And then what we did, and I'm using organic Honeycrisp apples from our produce department out there, mainly because they're my favorite. And simply,
I love the Honeycrisps.
I live and breathe for these every season. So, go ahead. No, you can go. Pull it. They're stuck on the parchment.
Everybody's listening. They were stuck.
Right? And The skewers. We've had a lot of questions this season about the skewers, and these are ones that our bakery department actually uses for their own caramel apples. You know, being an employee here, I went and pilfered their drawer to get some. But quite simply, we had somebody the other day come in and ask, you know, about them, and they wanted to look at these, and they realized they're just a wooden dowel from, like, you know, the local hardware store. And so he went and spent the 25 cents at the hardware store, got the wooden dowel, and made his own. And that's really all that they really are. But you simply skewer, wash your apples first, peel the stickers, skewer the apple. Don't go all the way through the apple, go about halfway through, and then just simply work it around in your caramel and dip it around until it get a nice good coating. Sometimes, especially as you can tell, it's sat just a little bit and some of the caramels thinned out a little bit. I might go back in and do a second coating just to make sure there's lots of caramel on it. And actually for the live audience today, instead of eating the caramel apple on the stick, we're going to slice the apples and you'll get them as a dip, because that's honestly how I prefer to eat the caramel apples versus trying to wrestle a stick and all of that stuff.
I'm with you, Dennis.
So.
Did you go over all the ingredients that were in this?
I did.
Excellent.
You were busy with your
I was.
I can't say that word.
And
there you go.
And can we actually get a copy of that so we could put it up on the website? That
Sure,
would be great.
absolutely.
All
And
right.
like I said, it is in the Seasons magazine, and we have them. These magazines still available in the store. They're a limited quantity, but we still have some available. And also Hy-Vee.com puts not only this issue on, but they also put all of the past issues on. And I can tell you, we've used this magazine a lot this month, in the month of October. It's been featured in some of our dinners that we do here in the club room, some of the recipes, and they're really, really good, high-quality recipes that are fairly simple to do. So,
thank you so much.
You're welcome very much.
I can't wait. How many people had caramel apples this season already? Oh, nobody. Awesome. This is going to be really good. I certainly hope that other people had the opportunity. Tom, play Happy Birthday for yourself, will you?
Well, I can.
Let's sing.
I got a scary song about not knowing what's in your food, if you want to hear that one.
Let's hear it.
This is Witch's Brew. So.
Tom Allen, Witch's Brew.
Okay, and I can play Happy Birthday for myself.
All right.
And the last word in this song is boo, and I really like it. If you all get like on 1, 2, 3 or something and sing boo.
You'll have to give us the cue. We're not really bright.
What can't you hear? Can't you hear what?
Oh,
Me?
good. I like it so much. I want you to do it louder. Boo!
Boom! You got it. Okay.
Do we get another chance?
That's how scary it is.
Do we get another chance?
Even when you do know. Yeah, here we go. Ready?
All right, yeah.
Even when you do know, sometimes you don't. You'd wish you didn't know. But anyway. What's it going to do to... Boom!
Boo!
Oh, that was kind of anemic. One more time. What's it going to do? Boom! That was way cool. Oh, look at that.
All right.
That guy is really scary.
Wait, Kathy's got to have hers.
So did I hear something about happy birthday?
Yeah,
Here,
it's
you gotta
Tom's.
sing it to me.
Tom,
My name is
ready?
Tom.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tom. Happy birthday to you. Happy Halloween too, right? Okay, did we wear them long enough? That's good. That's great. Okay. Really? Okay, so I don't know whether you were watching, but while all this fun was going on, I put the wine in the farro.
Yours looks like Halloween.
Mine does. Mine does have Halloween colors. Isn't that great? That's awesome. And I covered up my butternut squash because I knew it wasn't going to get finished in time, and then everybody was going to have a riot in here, and that wouldn't be good because they might destroy the room, and Dennis and Hy-Vee may not bring us back.
You have such an imagination.
Yes. I know what happens when people get hungry. So, yeah, it's very scary. It can be scary, right? So, anyway, Tom, that was a great song. I love that song. It was absolutely perfect. I actually had a verse from Shakespeare that I wanted to share with everybody, and I might be able to find it because I think it came from Macbeth, and one of the listeners actually sent it to me ahead of time because he asked if that's what we were cooking this evening. Well, I think
burn and cauldron bubble means something of eye of newt and toe of frog.
Yeah, you're doing good. You're doing really good. I don't know if I can find. I don't know if I can really find it. So while I'll look for it while we're talking here and see if I can find it because it was a good one, but I think I nuked it. it was fun, but I think I got rid of it. Anyway, one of the things that you have to do when you're cooking this risotto is do what Kathy's doing, which is stir. So you're adding the broth and then you're stirring, and the stirring motion helps break down the starch on the outside layer of the rice and therefore adds to the creaminess of it. And it'd be great if you could actually see this. I don't know, can we hold it up? That'd be good. And what you want to do is you want to keep your fire basically on about a medium-high heat, all right? So about a medium-high heat is where you want your fire because you want your broth to be also simmering lightly, not cold like the guy from Serious Eats talks about, because you want everything to just be merging together really nice so that the broth is hot, the dish that you're cooking, you're preparing is at the same temperature so that there's no cooling off, heating up as you're adding all this product to it. And then what you're doing is you're cooking everything out, right? You see there's no broth at the bottom here. It's all being cooked off here. Are you enjoying that, Candy Apple? It needs a plate. We'll get him a plate, absolutely. And you're adding broth then only about, like I said, a little bit of a ladle to 2 ladles at a time, depending upon how much rice or farro you have cooking in your pot. And then you're going to cook it out until it's time to add it again. Now, the thing about risotto that I absolutely, everything that I love about risotto is that you are putting so much attention into it when you're cooking. It's something that you really can't go away. You don't have to stir it constantly, but it's nice if you want to, you can. Otherwise, you can stir it every 3-4 minutes, something like that. Just give it a little bit of time to cook in the juice and in its broth and rest. But basically, you cannot just leave it on the stove and walk away from it for a long period of time. That would not be good. And you don't want anything to stick as you're cooking either. So if you find that things are sticking a little bit, you want to get under there and get them you want to keep them from sticking, and you want to add more broth. That's very, very important. So nothing sticking. And I think that you also made this point at the beginning, Kath, which was really a good point. When you're cooking that, when you're making that soffrito at the beginning with the garlic and the onion or the shallot and the carrot and celery, you're not coloring that. You're letting it just get a little translucent, softened up a little bit. You're not trying to brown it or anything like that. Okay? You're just cooking it a little bit because it's going to continue cooking throughout the whole process. Wow, this is looking beautiful. Those of you listening, the butternut squash is taking on a beautiful color right now. A little bit of caramelization on some of it, which is nice, and there's fresh sage in there that's going to add a lot of wonderful flavor to it. It would have been nice if we had had a little bit more fresh sage. We would have. Actually, Kathy, you have a little bit more here, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could we chop up a little bit and we'll put it in then at the last couple of minutes too? We'll do that. Do it. All right. Any questions that anybody has? Because if they do, we can pass the mic around. Yes. Okay. Hold on. So we're going to run over here and see, and then you can pass it around to everybody if they have questions, because I've got to get back to my farrotto. Okay.
Did you peel the butternut squash?
Yeah, absolutely.
You did. Okay.
He didn't.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't do very much except talk. But any other questions that people have or comments you can add?
Now I'm whipping.
Hold on, because nobody can hear you. So just give us 1 sec.
Hold on.
I just said sometimes I'll just bake the squash. It's just so easy.
Yep.
And then you just scoop out the flesh and
it's a wonderful
throw it in there
way
when
to
you
add
want
a different flavor layer to
and
roast
it. And it kind of caramelizes too.
Exactly. Beautiful. You can do that with squashes. You can, if you're in the springtime and you want to add summer squashes or the summer, you can broil them in the oven so it adds a nice flavor to it. You can add at the end again. And again, anytime you can add a flavor layer, it's certainly worthwhile experimenting with it and doing it. And I'll tell you, the thing about risotto that's so wonderful is that, again, it takes to anything. It marries with everything. So anything that you like, if you like seafood, if you like chicken, if you like, whatever, vegetables, pork, meats, anything, it's perfect. It just goes well with it. You probably, if you're going to use some meats like pork or beef, you might want to consider using a red wine instead of a white wine. I would probably use a red wine instead of a white wine with that.
Steve, did you say that this was going to be a contest between you and Kathy as to who liked which one more? Did you say that at the beginning?
No, because I know that Kathy is a much better cook
She
than
just
I
put
am.
in the amount of cheese that she just put in that dish.
She loses.
The amount of cheese that she just put in that dish sealed the deal right there for me. I'm there.
You know what, Dennis?
He'll do it too. Believe me.
It's actually interesting that you mention that, because some people, in order to make a more robust and rich dish, they will add cream to their risotto at the end. Or they'll add whipped cream even, not sweetened, of course. Whipped cream to their risotto at the end. I personally look at that as cheating. You don't need to do something like that. Yes, will it add richness? Of course it'll add richness, but it's totally unnecessary. I used to even, I'll admit this, I used to, when I was making risotto for 6, when no one was looking at the very end, I would dump a whole stick of butter into it.
I used to catch them.
Yeah, sometimes she did catch me.
Out.
Sometimes she did. But now I'll use maybe a third if I even use that much of a stick of butter at the end. I don't even use that much, because it's just, if you really spend the time and work with the dish throughout, and you have a rich broth, again, such a key, that rich broth, then you don't need all that butter. The creaminess can come from the Parmigiano, but I must say that you really do need to use a really good cheese at the end, the Parmigiano, because it adds so much flavor to your dish. Before we get too far,
is that you probably notice I've been tasting as I go, and it's really important to continue to taste. You need to make sure it has enough salt. You need to make sure it's cooked properly. We want a little bit of a bite to the rice, and I think that's where it's at right now.
So my butternut squash is actually perfect. It might be even a tiny bit too soft, but we're going to turn that off, and we're going to add a little bit of fresh thyme at the end and fresh sage into this dish, just about maybe a minute before we serve it, so that it has a little bit of a chance to pick up the fresh herb flavors at the end, because herb flavors tend to dissipate quickly once they're cooked. I want to tell you a little bit about next week's show, if I can find my cheat sheet. Here it is. Next week, we have as our guest through Skype video, we have Jesse Griffiths, the author of A Field, A Chef's Guide to Preparing and Cooking Wild Game and Fish. Jesse is going to be with us via Skype video, as I said, and along with Jesse is our local chef, Avi Pogel, who is going to be bringing in some of his fresh game that he has actually himself. Let's see, how do we say that nicely? He hunted it, and then he prepared it, right? He acquired it. Yes, he acquired it himself, and he will be preparing it for all of us. So Jesse Griffiths is in Austin, Texas, and I think it's going to be a very interesting show and a lot of fun. This is his book, A Field, and following that, on the following week, we have, I can't even remember what we have the following week. The week after that will be our Thanksgiving show, and I heartily recommend that everybody make a point to try to come to that, because it will be, as actually every week is here, really delicious. Tom, I think it's time for some music, because we're about ready to rock on out of here for our listeners. You've been listening to Great Taste on KRUU 100.1 FM, the solar-powered voice of Fairfield, Iowa. I'm Steve Boss. Kathy Dubois has been cooking away here. Dennis Lopp, the Hy-Vee catering manager. We want to thank Hy-Vee for having us. And Jason Strong from FMC, thank you. Also thanks to James Moore and Crew FM, Caleb Flynn, and everyone else. Thank you, Ann Dietrich. And we'll be back next week live from Hy-Vee with Jesse Griffiths.
Great taste. Sweet. So good to taste.